And everything should be good. We should be coming up live here. Yep, I see us coming up live here on the stream. Everything's good there. So I'm going to go ahead and kick this off. Hi, I am Charles McFall, Digital Media Track Director, and we are ready to kick off Dragon Con weekend.
Yeah!
Yeah! That's the most cheering we're going to get right now because, it's tough. It's tough this weekend. It is tough. But the branding, we want everybody to know, the branding is DragonCon goes virtual. That is your hashtag, DragonCon goes virtual. You can find it out on Twitch and Twitter and everywhere else. But we are the Digital Media Track, as you see in that top corner. And our first panel is Be Our Guest. I do want to let you know, I'm going to switch back over. You won't see our faces for a second. We have these schedules out. Let me find my transition button. There it is. So today we have, there's one more. At midnight, there's going to be a director's review of the day at the end of the day with my boys from Almost Daily Discourse. Just to have some fun and talk about the good stuff that happened during the day. And get some feedback from you. What went well? What could be done better? Those kind of things. As we do at the end of the con usually, but that's just not going to happen this year. So lots of great programming. And I wanted to announce, even though I put it in our Discord, that we managed to get Mark Gunn. We got Mark Gunn to do the music wrap-up panel. Now, it's not live, but it will be aired at the end of the day on Sunday night, then twice on Monday, Labor Day, on YouTube and Facebook. You can check it out there. So with all that being said, I thought I was going to ramble on more, but I'm not. So you get an extra 5 minutes, Tyra.
All right.
Here is Be Our Guest, and Tyra, take it away.
Well, hi, I am Tyra Burton, and welcome to Be Our Guest. We know that you want to be a guest on a podcast or you're looking for guests, and we're here to hopefully help you guys learn how to do that. So just a little bit about me. I'm actually a professor at Kennesaw State University, and I've been podcasting for over a decade. My first podcast was something called Leveling Azeroth about the world of Warcraft. So I'm a gamer girl at heart. And now I'm going to let my wonderful other panelists introduce themselves. And since Travis, you were the first to write me, you get to go first.
Okay, great. So yeah, I'm Travis Tippins. I run the Fantasy Inn podcast, which features speculative fiction author interviews, as well as just sort of general discussion panels. And I've been podcasting for about a year and a half or so.
Awesome. Mike, you want to let us in on who you are?
Sure. My name is Mike Faber. I'm the host of the Earth Station 1 podcast. I also host the Earth Station Who podcast and co-host on the DragonCon Report podcast. I've been running this little podcast network called the ESO Network for the last 8 years. And we have right now 23 different shows on our network, and we are talking about all things geek. I've been podcasting now for about 12 and a half years.
Long time. So Sean, you're next.
Hi, my name is Sean Weiland. I co-host the live stream The Beery Traveler, where we sample beers from locally in the Atlanta, Georgia area, as well as surrounding states and occasionally internationally. We have craft cocktails and interview musicians and have bands play live. I also the founder and co-host of the Wasted Knowledge podcast, where we interview subject matter experts, anything from NASA scientists to hairdressers, also while making them cocktails, if you can sense a theme.
Yeah.
I've been podcasting for 3 years, acting on voiceover and audio dramatic podcasts for about 5, and I've been bartending for 16.
Well, that certainly came in handy.
Yeah.
So Hammond, do you want to wrap us up and let everybody know who you are?
Sure. My name is Hammond Chamberlain. I started podcasting back in 2013. I host Beyond the Playlist, which is a interview show that I interview people who do creative things. So I've interviewed everything from professional wrestlers to sculptors to directors to actors, musicians, you name it. I've talked to them. I also co-host Soundography with Brian Ibbett, which is a crash course in music, one band at a time. And then I produce 6 or 7 other shows, but I also did booking for guests for Women Kick Ass and for Current Geek back when they had guests.
That's awesome. So I guess I think Hammond, you might be the perfect one to start off with, since what made you want to have a podcast where you have guests and then we can all kind of talk about how we use guests?
So for me, it was very simple. I tried to do a single mic show and my wife called it boring. So I needed the second person to talk to and a different person to talk to keep it interesting and alive.
I just started solo casting, and I've discovered that after about 7 episodes, I don't have anything to talk to myself about. So.
It's an art form, and I admire the people who do it. I worship the people who do it really well, but it's not my skill set yet, and it's not something haven't waded back into those waters out of just pure fear. So guests are, I don't know if they're called a crutch because all the work that goes into getting them and keeping them and managing, but at the same time, it's a huge advantage for me to know how to book and use guests.
Who else wants to talk about why they added guests to their shows? Go for it. Just talk.
Okay.
So weird when we're not in person, isn't it? It's
I know.
I like that we raised our hands, though.
Can I talk, teacher, please? Can I, please?
Don't do that. You see, I am a teacher, and I do respect raising hands.
Exactly. Well, it's better than I used to do. Ooh, 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 when I was in school. So it was interesting, though. For us, we, started having at first like Doctor Who guests on our show and guests from, British sci-fi and such. And then it just expanded into adding authors and artists and such. And we ended up creating a segment of our show for Earth Station 1. We started calling it the Geek Seat. And what we ended up doing is interviewing the person for about 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on the person. And then we had what we called the Geek Seat questions, which is a series of 10 questions to see what level of geekdom they have on our show, on, what they're about and everything. And when we did that, we ended up having, some great answers we would never expect to get from some of these celebrities we would have on the show or whoever we had. But then we also sometimes got, well, I'm not a geek, I don't talk about that type of stuff. And I look at them and I say, yes, you're a geek. You don't have to be a nerd geek, but you could be a geek about art, you could be a geek about music, you could be a geek about sports, you could be a geek about beer, anything. Everything has a passion, and geek is just another word for passion. And it's pretty awesome. And we've gotten some amazing people on our show because Earth Station 1 we've been doing for over 10 years now. And we've had some like TV celebrities. We've had, musicians, like big musicians and such, who've gone into the Geek Seat, and they just take it and they just throw it out there, and it's just awesome what they come up with. And getting people on the show it used to be a problem, but as you get seasoned and feel more comfortable talking to people and reaching out, it just gets easier and easier to get stuff.
So
Yes.
I'll throw in there. So the first podcast that I started, because I'd been on other ones, but the first one that was like I'd helped form was it's called Wasted Knowledge, and we actually knew we wanted guests from the get-go, because the whole concept it's the conversation you have with your bartender. It's just because it was started by another bartender friend of mine, and we loved that part of our job was having conversations. Like, we are natural bred conversationalists, and a lot of times we just, for whatever reason, we get a lot of information out of people naturally. Hey, where are you from? What are you doing? How's it going? And you have a cocktail, and we realized that those are really, at least for us, really magic moments. So it was just right off the gate, like, we have to find people, and we actually would ask people that were our guests at the bar, like, hey, do you want to be on a podcast? And we're going to start recording some episodes. Because we would get, CEOs for Home Depot. We'd get traveling musicians that were in town to play a gig that would come to the restaurant. We'd get just random people, but there are very few people that really hate their lives and are super boring. Most of them have something going on, some kind of drama, something they're super passionate about, kind of like Mike was saying, like, everyone's geeky about something. So we kind of knew that that's exactly the avenue that we wanted to go down, was talking to people about their hardcore interests and what their life was like, and having that bartender moment.
I love the bartender moment. So Travis, how do you approach guests on your show?
Well, I guess the reason why I wanted to add guests in the first place was a lot of people in the fantasy or science fiction communities, if they're book lovers, they might be a little introverted. Not everyone, but that's kind of the stereotype. And so you don't always have the conversations with like the authors that you read their work and you just love it. And then sometimes in a panel environment, It's just you're hearing them having like a very structured group discussion. So that one-on-one chat is what I was kind of going for. So I really like doing long-form interviews. They're typically around an hour or so in length, so we can really go into depth on their personal lives, their passions, their interests, what's going on with them, as well as their work, why they put certain things into their work. I don't really go into like plot points or why did you do this with your character. I go more into like, why is artificial intelligence something you're passionate about, right? Why are these major like social themes what you're working into your work? And so far people have really enjoyed it. So I've loved having guests on my podcast, especially recently when all of my conversations, they're virtual. So I don't really get to go out and have those chats with people anymore.
I know I go through the Starbucks drive-through just so I can chat with somebody that I don't know. It's so sad. So I really do need to like do more guests. So I guess let's talk about what are some of the best ways that if you're starting out and then as you rock along, but particularly when you're starting a podcast, what do you think are some of the best ways to reach out to guests to come in and be a part of you when you're first starting off and you might not have a lot of material to show them? I know for me that I was lucky that I know a lot of people through things like this. So when I started asking for guests, I just went to my friends first. So I have a bunch of author friends, and they were the first ones I asked to be on because I knew I could have a conversation with them. I knew we already had chemistry. But what if you've kind of evaporated your friends and you're thinking, okay, I need to reach outside of that box?
A lot of times. Interest groups, exactly. Facebook groups, or different if you have interests, like each week our show does a different topic, so we go into the different groups and find out someone from that group, and I put out a call. Hey, we're talking about this week The Godfather. Does anyone want to come and talk about it? And hopefully we just don't get a mobster or two to come to join us or something like that.
That would be awesome.
What I did was, after I exhausted the people I knew, because I'd been playing in bands and had done theater and some TV, behind the scenes stuff. So once I exhausted all that, it was then talking to them and saying, hey, do you know someone I could use? Like almost like a referral, like you do, like your dentist, they're always asking for referrals. And then once I got comfortable with that and had a little bit of kind of like credibility under my belt, then I was able to go to Twitter and reach out to agents and gatekeepers. And I mean, in many cases, the worst they're going to say to you is no.
Right.
The most frightening is when you have someone that was on like your wish list, and then they say yes, and then you have to prepare, and then you have to be able to fill an hour of interesting conversation, which is not usually difficult, but sometimes it can be if they're being tight-lipped, or if they're having an off day. And then there are times where you get someone you're expecting to talk about one thing, and then they have a completely other agenda, and you end up talking about something completely different. So you really have to not only be comfortable, but you also have to be ready.
Being prepared, I think, is just, you have to. Even if you don't use it, at least you have it.
You have to be able to steer the conversation too. And, like Hammond was saying, you might sometimes go down a path you're not expecting, but you have to be able to steer it back to the direction you want it to go, or it could end up lasting, a 35-minute interview that you had scheduled can go 2 hours or something. If depends also, this person might be coming onto the show with an agenda that they didn't even tell you about. So you have to be careful about that too.
The two that I have in mind, we covered the topic we were going to cover. And then one of them had just been diagnosed with cancer and went off on a thing about holistic medicine. And another one, it was just after the election, and he went off on a thing about politics. And then both of them apologized afterwards. But you know what? I kind of rolled with it because it was what they want to talk about. And my whole show is putting the spotlight on them and letting them kind of have their thing. So I can put guardrails and bumpers up, but if I try to push the conversation too hard, then they're not getting to express themselves. So it's kind of a style choice.
No, it totally makes sense. And that's the best way to do it a lot of times, is to be free flow and go into that. It's pretty awesome.
So Travis and Sean, do you guys have ways that you approach people?
Yeah. So yeah, I do. What helped me starting out, at least, was when I was trying to really go for like my dream guest, or like punch above my like itty bitty podcast weight class, was just being really professional. And a lot of my guests are represented by a publicist, so I can go through them. So if you want to go through like somebody who manages your guest, that's a good way of doing it. And if you can show that like, hey, this is 2 past interviews I've done that are very similar to this person that I'm trying to get. This is what you can expect. This is the time commitment. This is what I normally do. Here's a link to like our press kit. And I can't stress enough, like having a good press kit is really, really good. And so that's the way that you can like have this polished shine, and you're more likely to get a big guest that way, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah, that's definitely what Travis and I think Hammond was saying too. Is lean on your backlog. Like as you've done stuff and you've done really good stuff, that's just that lets you go to other professionals and say, "Hey, I'm also a professional. Let's work something out." The only thing I would have to add to that is normally when I send a cold email to like a musician that I want to have on a show or a band, I keep it short. Like I'll attach our press packet. It'd be like, hey, I love your stuff. I'm pretty sure you'd love to be on the show. We send you beers. Like I basically tell them what we do for you real quick, like in a couple sentences. I'd love to have you on. If you want to know more, send me an email back and check out the press packet. Because I don't want to waste their time. You know, they can say no, or they could be like, hey, I'm interested. But I think they're going to be happier if they don't have a big wall of text to look at in an email and go,
I like that. Well, and from a marketer's point of view, I think Sean is absolutely right, because you've got to connect to why they want to be on there, what's in it for them, because like it or not, end of the day, that's it. And sometimes that's your audience is the same as who they're selling to, and sometimes it's to expand them. And I think that's like really important to include. And I think press kits, people don't think about them, but they are so important to have a media kit, even if you're just starting out, that talks about who you are, because that helps give you some street cred as well, to know how to do things. So how do you find publicists? So I know sometimes you can go to somebody's page. Is that what you guys have done in the past to find out who to reach out to? Hammond, do you want to take that?
A couple times it's been by accident. You'll go to their website, you send an email saying, hey, I'd like to have you on the show, and you get a response from the publicist. And then if you can get in with a firm, what I was going to say is there are a few PR firms now that I've gotten kind of or built a relationship with, and I'm able to get guests really easily because they'll send me and say, hey, this person likes to talk. You're the kind of show that opens up and lets them really kind of go. Once you kind of get in with a couple of those firms, you can really kind of use that to your advantage, and you can use that later with your press kit when you're putting together and saying, hey, I've worked directly with these people because they trust me, that kind of thing. And that goes a long way as well. But yeah, sometimes it's by accident, and other times I've had one group find me. So it kind of works out.
Well, and that's a good question. So I've had people ask to be on our podcast. How do you guys vet when somebody comes to you instead of you going to them?
I do research usually on who the person is and find out if it's a fit for our show a lot of times. You know, sometimes we get people, you know, we're not that picky. We'll take pretty much anyone, but, you know, it has to, you know, if it's someone who is completely out of right field for our show, I won't, you know, and I'll respectfully say, hey, you know, you're maybe not a good fit for our show, but here's a couple places that you might want to talk to or such. And it's worked out pretty positive with that. And the people thank me for my professionalism and be able to point them in the right direction to help them out.
Yeah, since everything I deals with creativity, the only other time I've kind of gone outside of that was I talked to a guy who was on a Super Bowl winning football team. And the reason I pulled him in was not because he was learning how to play bass, so it was kind of an easy in. But for me, I want to talk about the dedication and the lifestyle that he had to live when he was being a professional athlete, which is when you are doing something like acting or, you know, whatever, you have to live and breathe that project for a while. And so I was able to kind of draw that similar line. But, you know, for the most part, I just make sure that they can carry a conversation. So usually it's sometimes like a pre-call. Sometimes it's a couple emails back and forth. More times than not, I think people are checking me out to see if I'm going to be a schmuck, then I'm checking them out.
Well, it's like an interview for both of you guys, figuring out if it's a good fit for you guys to talk to.
So somebody out there asked us, who in particular do you want to interview? So Travis, go first. We'll start with you, and then we're just going to round robin.
Well, I read a ton, and I'm a huge fan of so many authors. So it's more like at this point who I don't want to interview. At this point, I guess the person I'm most excited about interviewing in the near future, I'm hoping to get him, is P. Jelly Clark, who is one of the founders of the Violet magazine, as well as just a phenomenal writer of short fiction.
Sean, you're up next on The Podcast is Right.
That is honestly, that's tough.
It
So
is.
for me, I mean, and I kind of already mentioned, like, conversation is my favorite part. And some people can be famous and they're not very good conversationalists, and it is part of my job to get that out of them, and I can do that. But I cherish just a naturally good conversation. It's like one of my favorite parts, inside or outside of podcasting. So amongst favorite people, that's tough because sometimes you don't know. I think overall actors and writers tend to kind of fall in that category. Not always. I mean, I've interviewed some amazing scientists that have great stories, but there's a few like local actors that I'd like to have on the podcast. I don't even know if I should be naming them or not, but one of them I used to work with, and he quit to go keep acting, and he used to be I just forgot the gentleman's name. The actor who played Black Panther just passed away. Chadwick Boseman. He was Chadwick Boseman's friend and personal trainer for a while. So I want to have him come on. I already had asked him to come on for season 3, but now I think it'd be really nice to have him on and chat with him. So that's who I'm going after next for next season.
Fingers
That's awesome.
crossed for you.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Mike, you want to go?
Oh, sure. I would love to get Weird Al Yankovic on my show. I think that would be awesome. We've tried to get Kevin Smith a couple times, just schedules haven't worked out. And, there's a couple other folks, so that it's like dream gets type thing. Most of the time, when we get guests on our show, it's, people like, I can't believe I'm talking to you, but I don't say that to them. You have to play it cool and everything when you're trying to do, you can't fanboy out on them and everything. But it's kind of neat to do. And I love being able to do that with my podcasts. We've talked to Doctor Who, like the people who've played the Doctor. We've talked to people who've been on the show or behind the scenes. And it's just been great because these are people I grew up with watching on TV and such. And, talking to other people would be really awesome. Would love to get, some other podcasters on our show who, I listen to. We've talked with Peter Sagal from Wait, Don't Tell Me, and, stuff like that. And it's just great because I listen to their show every week, and it's like being able to talk to them is really awesome. So it's pretty cool.
I'll second the Weird Al Yankovic ask because I've been a fan since his first album in '83. So
me too.
Day and date, I'm that guy for him. The other one that I'm really would be interested to talk to would be like Steve Vai. I'd love to talk to him.
Oh, he'd be awesome.
I love Vi.
And then Mark Dacascos, the actor, he was in the most recent John Wick film, the bald guy, but he was also he's a bunch of other things that I really enjoyed. I'd love to talk to him. But it's funny because I've had a couple of conversations with these wish list guys, and one of them didn't turn out the way I wanted him to.
Really?
And, it went sideways, and it wasn't a good conversation. They weren't nice people, and I kind of regretted having that interaction because it changed my entire view of everything they've done.
Did it turn you off from being a fan of theirs?
Not pre-conversation stuff, but anything they've done since has definitely been tainted. I'll be honest.
Oh, I hate that because you think that they're a great person, and then you talk to them, and it's just like, oh, I don't like you as a person anymore, or
He was definitely came across in the pompous jerk role pretty well, and it was rough.
And I think That's the worst, when you like somebody's one way when you're talking off screen and then you get on screen and they're totally different. And you're like, wow, I know the real you. So mine would be the Kelly twins, the NASA astronauts.
That would be awesome.
I heard one of them speak at CES one year, and he was just amazing. The one that spent so much time in space. I can't remember which twin is which is bad of me. But I think their lives have just been amazing in terms of what they've been doing publicly and for service, and then in NASA. So that's on my list. And I have his autograph hanging on my wall too. So I could show that and say, now you need to come talk to me. So I think Hammond started this next question that somebody in our audience has about how do you get a bad guest to do better? And I know I've had this experience. I'll wait to the end to talk about it because it's actually why I started this panel and asked to do it. So Hammond, why don't you kick us off with that?
Okay, so I can give you two quick examples of one how it worked and one how it didn't. So the one that didn't work, I had a guy on who was an artist, and I had reached out to him. I loved his work. I thought he did some awesome things. I even purchased one. It's hanging on my wall. You can't see it. And I get him on. He won't let me use his real name. I have to use his stage moniker, which already got me on the wrong foot because I'm not that. That's not what my show's about. It's about actual people. And then when I asked him questions like, hey, so tell me a little bit about how you got started and what you use for inspiration. He goes, I don't know.
Oh, the short answers. Those are the worst.
So I had blocked off for an hour to talk to this guy. 15 minutes in, I'm already doing the wrap up because he's answering in many times single syllable noises, not even words. And I was just like, I'm done. I can't fight through this anymore. So ethically, I posted the interview. It was up for about a year and now it's gone. And I put it up only because I told him I would. It wasn't like anything else. It was my own ethics saying, I told you I'd post it. I did. And now I'm over it. But then I've had other guests which started out very closed. You could feel the wall during the conversation. And then I asked a question about where they were from, and you can hear in the conversation, all of a sudden the wall goes away and they're like, oh my gosh, we can talk about home. And because I had that commonality, that piece of information, what would have been a very stilted conversation, you can hear instantly open up, and it changed the entire flow for the next, 45 minutes to an hour. And sometimes having just a piece of information that shows you actually cared enough to dig a little bit really goes a long way.
Yeah, I think that goes back to research too. That if you do enough research, it can help you if they get stuck. What do you guys, the rest of you do?
Oh, I want to bounce off that if I can. Oh.
Sean, you win.
Go for it, Sean.
Again. Thank you. No, so I was going to say, because oftentimes, at least in my workaday life, like I'm completely cold with everyone that I meet. So it's a lot of it. What I take into podcasting is just trying to be as empathetic as possible. So when a guest says something that might be incredibly inflammatory or insensitive or anything negative that's about to bomb the entire experience, like, all right, well, let's talk about that, because it can just be, hey, that person has that opinion, and well, it looks like I'm have to edit this podcast now, which I honestly have done. I don't let, because it's a reflection of my brand. I don't let stuff like that go out. They can be that person, but they're not going to be that to me, and I'm not going to promote it. But I do walk through that process. I go, okay. So you said that. Does that mean you feel this way about this? And I'll try to lead people to explain maybe why they feel a certain way. And yeah, when they clam up, like Hammond had that perfect. It's just like, all right, well, let's try to feel out and ask things about like, where might your comfort zone be? If they're super clammed up about things like that. But yeah, I mean, definitely have a bit of empathy for your guest. Try to feel out what makes them comfortable and why they might have a certain seemingly heavily biased opinion. Because I mean, that's why you're there. You're there to have that kind of talk. So don't be afraid to dive in and really just don't judge. Don't judge. Just keep asking questions.
Yeah. And so kind of playing off that, I try to make my guests as comfortable as possible. And that's like even from stage one when I'm booking them. So I'll ask them up front, like, hey, like, are you comfortable with video or would you prefer audio only? Are there any subjects that are just do not talk about, like that'll shut you down completely? Is there anything that you really do want to talk about that might not be, your latest thing that you're promoting? So I think it's important to do that. And also something I've only recently started doing is as soon as they like come into like the waiting room or whatever and we're chatting, I let them know, hey, great, glad you're here. We're not recording yet. Because that's something that I found, I never really thought about that until another podcaster was talking to me about it. And that's something that I think really sets them at ease because they know, okay, you don't have to be on your A game right this moment. And then when people start clamming up, I kind of over-research. So I'll have like my prepared questions and then I'll have maybe like 5 levels down from that. If I get just like a quick, I'll be like, okay, well, what about this? What about the next thing? Or how does that branch off into this? So I kind of know like where I can go from there, because I've had interviews that, like Hammond was saying, prepped for an hour or so, and it really could have only gone 15 minutes if I hadn't been like trying to drag that more extra level out of them.
And that's the best thing about it is you be prepped for talking to this person, know what you're talking about, because there's also times if you haven't prepped enough, they'll get an attitude because they didn't think you cared enough to figure out who you're talking up to and everything. That's just another interview. You want to make it as personal as possible to talk to these people who appear on your show. Also, one of the things we have that we figured out over the years is do not let the guest take over the show either. Because there's times when you're interviewing somebody and they get on a roll and they just go blah, 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 or they have such a strong personality, they shut you out and they just basically take over the whole thing. And that could get pretty tough also, trying then to cut them off because you don't want to seem rude when they're on like a tangent or something like that.
So what do you guys think is, I've had that situation. What do you guys do to try to rein it back in if somebody has taken control of the train?
So I had a guy, I asked him, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into music. And then I didn't say another word for 22 minutes. I finally send a message to him in the Skype chat and say, hey, I've got other questions if you're interested. And then he wrapped up his point and I was able to continue on talking. I've used the Skype chat a lot to save those kind of things. Going back to the bad guess, I had a guy who was very inflammatory. He came across really badly. And I asked him at the end, are you sure you want that going out? Because I kept trying to redirect him the whole time. And he's like, yeah, go ahead and put it out. So I waited, I put it all together and I sent it to him before it went out. And I said, okay, this is what's going out. Are you sure this is what you want out? Because again, like was said, it reflects on my brand. I don't want controversy. I don't want, to be the guy who throws the spoon in the bucket to stir stuff up. I don't need that. And after he listened to it, he wrote me back and says, yeah, don't do that. I don't want that out there. So it saved him some trouble. It saved me a lot of trouble too. So, sometimes going that extra mile to protect yourself and your brand and your image and your show can really save you quite a bit.
Yeah. Kindness is always important.
Oh, gotcha.
And I'm born in the South, so it's hard for me to interrupt anybody. So that's my problem. Try to drag somebody back because we had a guest just take the train and I was getting text messages from my co-host of do something. I'm like, I'm trying, but I have to be nice.
We had a professional wrestler on our show and he just took over got into character and was like, started going off and, playing his role. And then as soon as, we jumped back in and started talking about other things, he hopped out of character. He was that too much? It's like, yeah.
Just a scooch.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think this, somebody in the audience asked this, and I think this is important for guests, is to prepare them. And I think it's great that Travis talks to them about what topics should we not talk about, but what else can a guest do to be a great guest? So, we're all thinking now.
So we are asked to be a guest or?
Like you're going to go be a guest on a show. What can you do to be a great guest on a podcast? So the flip side, what would we love for our guests to do before they show up?
So basically,
find out about us.
Every time I show up on when I used to do Breaking the Panel, my only go-to is making fun of Charles. So
that's easy. That's easy
I was
enough.
Say that's easy. We all do that.
That's low hanging fruit there. Come on.
Stuff. Make
What
fun
did
of
you call him?
Exactly. No, I hope they research who, when I go on a show, I find out about who's going to be interviewing me and such. I want to know what I'm walking into, that I'm not going to be ambushed, that I'm not going to be, they're not going to find out stuff about me that I didn't want to talk about or stuff. Or, is it going to be like a top 40 DJ type show or something like that, where they try to do a joke on me or something, see what they've done with past interviews and stuff. It's always easier to do stuff like that.
Definitely listen to whoever's podcast you're going on. Make sure you've while you're in the car, when we used to drive around in cars, I remember those days, listen to a podcast and know what it's like. So Sean, do you have anything that you want your guests to do?
So that was exactly at least the first thing I would say is just listen to one episode. At least get an idea of who you're going to go talk to and kind of the basic format that they go for. Outside of that, really for me, it's technical stuff. Like, have a good mic, have a good internet connection. Don't be like, oh, sorry, I forgot I was doing the interview, so I'm calling from my car. Back when we used to have cars. But that's it. It's like I had a band on, and I try to send out a tech sheet that says, no laptop mics. If you're going to be playing, especially you're going to be playing metal, I need you to mic your band, send it through an interface, plug it in your computer. No, not every guest has to do that, but have a good mic, a USB mic, because laptop mics are the worst, in my opinion. And just you want to sound good, and it's kind of one of those mutually beneficial things. I want to sound good for you and your podcast, and I want to sound good for me because I want people to think that I'm a competent speaker and somewhat good with technology. So you'll be prepared to sound good.
I think that's good.
I had a guy do an interview walking through Home Depot.
I mean,
no.
Oh yeah.
If you had a hardware related show, awesome.
No.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've had people do interviews with us. They were sitting at Starbucks, and you could hear the coffee frothing behind and everything, and the people sitting right next to them talking and everything. And it's like, sorry, I was I was running behind. I had stopped for coffee, and it's like, dude, this interview must not count much to you if you don't take the time to set up for it and everything. That's what also gets to me. It's like, I hope I'm putting the effort in to do a professional sounding podcast to make you sound good. And, I'll make you sound even better in post. But you know what? I want you to take the time to be able to, sound good coming in, wanting to talk to me.
Travis, do you find any particular problems with interviewing authors who are often introverts and don't want to talk to other people?
Surprisingly, not that much. Occasionally, I'll have someone who are giving me very short answers or something, and I have to draw them out. But other than that, I find that even if they're introverted, one-on-one conversation, when half the time they can't even see my face, we're doing audio only, they're able to open up more easily, and it's not as high of a bar for them to cross. And I guess when I'm helping them prepare ahead of time, if I'm a guest, I'm going to try to have a great, as close to a studio environment as I can, insulation around me, a high quality mic. But I'm not expecting most of these authors to have that. A lot of these people, I'm lucky if I can convince them to wear headphones when they're recording. And so if that's the case, I kind of send them a list hey, you don't have to have high quality equipment, but the number one thing or top 3 things you can do to help me out. Try to find a quiet room. I tell them soft, so think bedroom, closet, something with soft surfaces. Turn off your phone, your computer notifications, and please wear headphones. So if they can do those things, it makes the audio at least usable. Otherwise, sometimes it can be really, really tough.
Yeah, I agree.
But I have 4 dogs at my house, and even with the soundproofing, you could hear the dogs barking if they decide to go off. You every once in a while you do have stuff like that, and you can't take that personally, and just have to be prepared for it.
Yeah, I do a lot of online teaching, and I just let my dogs and cats happen. My cat co-teaches with me sometimes, and in some ways, for me at least, in types of podcasts I do, it makes it more human, but we're more loosey-goosey, kind of relaxed. I thought, Travis, it's interesting that you only do audio with your guests. You don't have video with them.
I do video occasionally. A lot of times I'll do audio only, just because sometimes people will request that and they'll prefer it. That's what they're more comfortable with. They don't have to feel like they're making themselves up for it or something. They can just chat. They sometimes forget that they're talking to a person, and so they open up more. And then also that's just because sometimes I'll use software that it's just audio only, and so it like focuses a little bit better. Like if they have a very low internet connection, I prefer the audio to be as pristine as possible rather than getting that video as well, especially if for a podcast it's only the audio making it into the final product.
That's a really good thing about bandwidth.
Yeah.
I will sometimes start a conversation when they first get on. If they have video capable or if they're comfortable with it, I'll have them start with video. But when we do the interview, I'll cut it down because I'm an audio only show, and video, I've had more problems with video causing lag and stutter and all kinds of issues. I'd rather have a cleaner feed, a cleaner file to work with than looking at them sometimes.
No, I'm the same thing. We've just started playing with video on my podcast. And, a lot of times some of the guests we have, oh, you didn't tell me we would be on video or something like that. We started off about a year ago doing video just so that way we don't talk over each other and such, because it's easier to see if you're trying to get someone's attention or something. And I thought it was great that we were able to do that. So I started moving our podcast to have a video feed up on YouTube and then also Facebook Live, and that we were able to talk to the people and be able to see them. But sometimes, my agent didn't say we were going to be doing video, so you have to almost get special permission for that too.
Yes, that's important to remember, especially now that so many podcasters have switched to doing those sort of things where we have a video maybe when we actually do it live. The thought of doing an interview live scares the crap out of me, just so we all are clear on that. I like to be able to edit. Editing is your friend.
Well, that's what we do. When we do ours, we have it as a raw feed. We don't say, we go through and we edit the audio for putting out to the public. The video is basically, this is what's going on behind. This is what you're actually not getting to see sometimes. We do that as like a sort of a bonus for our viewers and such.
It's just me staring at Hammond, who I thought had something to say.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I forgot what I said.
I'm sorry, Hammond.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm going to ask, we were all living through COVID and a pandemic. How has that changed your podcast and your interviewing for better and for worse? So who wants to take the first run at this? Sean, I know you do, so I'm nominating you.
Fine.
He was biting at it.
So for my podcast, I'm not doing it. I can't. It really genuinely relies on having a person-to-person interaction. For wasted knowledge, I'm literally bartending and making cocktails or giving drinks to people, and that's part of the process. Like I mentioned, that kind of bartender magic. And I could do something like that, but it's not what that show is. So that's on hold until I can get to a point where I'm comfortable, everyone else is comfortable, and we can start meeting face to face and doing that again. So it's unfortunate. I've been doing a lot of just regular old voiceover gigs, which is, luckily I have a booth. And then for the Beery Traveler, the live stream that we do, that we've been able to actually take pretty good care of. We can send beers to people and still meet on video, and because that's more of like a tasting kind of geeky, just sort of let's talk about the aroma and the nose and the flavor, and let's make some classic cocktails, like, so that we can still do that one. Really the only difference there is oftentimes I'm here and not with my co-host at his place. So that one was a really easy transition.
Well, and I think so many people are doing that. Like, that's like a normal thing, people getting together for cocktail hour. So you're just fitting right in.
Yeah, right. I didn't even know that was a thing. I have had a regular job, but not very often.
So I have a Zoom cocktail hour tonight with a bunch of us that would usually be having cocktails at Dragon Con. So you're just before your time.
That's,
there you go.
If you're going to just keep excelling, that's all you got to do, people.
Hammond, have you had more interesting guests?
Well, it's interesting because the things I've noticed is there are guests that I've wanted to get, and because they're not doing anything, I've been able to get some of them. The other thing that's happened is the conversations I am having with people usually go longer because people want to talk to people. The interaction is wanted to be there, and if the conversation's going well, then they'll want to engage. They don't want it to end. I had an interview just the other day with this lady who was in a few movies, and she does video game voices, and she does audiobooks, and we talked for almost 3 hours, and that was expensive because she was using basically her phone and a headset from London, and I was here, and that was an expensive phone call to make, but it was a conversation that I really, really looked forward to having, and I'm glad I got to have.
That's awesome.
Now, for me, it's, our guests have actually picked up a little bit. We actually, for a bit, had put away our guest segment for the show. And when COVID hit, we just decided to bring back our guest segment. And we've been not having any issues finding them. More people are willing to come on right now because they're stuck at home also. So it's pretty awesome.
It's true. Travis, have you gotten anybody because of COVID?
I will say it's probably easier on my end because of COVID, just because I've always been doing remote interviews. So one thing that helps is not having like the regular 8 to 5 job. So like I don't have to block off, like 12 or 13 hours of my day where I say, okay, I'm unavailable to interview. So if you're in Australia, if you're in like Central Europe or something, like it's probably hard for me to interview in like pre-COVID times. But now, like anytime that they're available, I'm available for the most part. So that helps a lot. I guess some of my guests are teachers or professors as well as writers. So now that school is kind of kicking back into session, that's not been as good.
Trust me, it's scary out there in teacher land.
I can imagine.
I can just say I'm very lucky. I teach all online, but it's even that is difficult. It's because you're trying to have conversations with people over a wire, which is what we're talking about. So somebody in the audience asked, what show do you want to guest on most and why? So Hammond, you want to go first?
Let's see. What show would I want to be on? I want to be on Breaking the Panel.
Really?
No, I don't know. I don't listen to a lot of shows that have guests. I feel like I do have a lot of shows I'd love to work on. A few shows, like I do editing and production. Those are shows I like to work on. But as far as being a guest, I've talked about everything from mental health to weight loss to the most recent Marvel film. So I mean, it really just, it's just a matter of being asked. I'll be on anything I'm asked to do.
Okay, y'all are thinking who has an answer.
This is like pie in the sky kind of stuff. Oh, I'd love to be on Ask Me Another.
Well, that would be awesome.
Right. I mean, that's if they want to come calling, that'd be great. I have nothing famous to contribute yet that I know of, but
soon.
So you're not ready for that. You're not ready for that Mark Maron interview, basically.
I don't drink. Can I still be on Sean's show?
Yeah, actually, I've been wanting to do ones that use non-alcoholic beer, and there's non-alcoholic spirits out there now. So yeah, man.
Okay, I'll do it.
Just learn things.
Right? Look at that. The magic is happening. I hit my microphone.
Yeah. No, I've always wanted to be on Sean's show. It's always been a dream of mine. So.
Man, two new guests. All right.
Yeah. And I do drink, so it's okay.
Perfect.
So it's even
I hope
better.
I don't mix those weeks up because that'll be really messed up.
Oh, it's like, what is this crud you're serving me? Come on. No, for me, I don't know which show I'd probably, I would love to be doing a segment on Wait, Don't Tell Me, or, I'd like to, I'd be fascinated to talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson on his show about science and everything. I think that would be kind of interesting to do. So, but I'm open. I'm not proud. I'll be on pretty much anyone's podcast who asks. So it's a good thing.
Travis, do you have one that you're hoping for?
Yeah, I guess probably my pie in the sky, like science fiction podcast would be Our Opinions Are Correct. Just because I love it, and they're one of the best science fiction podcasts I found out there. I just have to probably up my game as a guest before I could ever make it on there.
My dream one is David Tennant does a podcast, because I just love the way he interviews and gets people to talk. So, but outside of that, I would love to one day be on the Almost Daily Discourse. Got a smile from Charles. And Charles has a great podcast, which is all about interviews, called Finding the Stories. And if you haven't heard it, this was your local advertisement for it. So that is actually my most awkward guest experience, was because every question I asked him, he wormed in about his book or his universe. Every single time. I thought I was going to throw something at him. I know. And he's a sweet, sweet man. He just didn't know how to be a guest on a podcast. So how do you suggest people, when they're on being a guest, tell people about their works? Do you have a point in the podcast where you do that? And if they are doing it too much, how do you cut them off? Because I did not do the best job at that.
So for one of them, I actually tell everyone that I have a space for you to pimp all your stuff. Like, and so I have a time. This is the time. So I try to prep people so that they know when to do it. And then when they come on, and it's kind of, we're getting back to that, like they have a whole agenda and like, oh yeah, I was just this thing. Let's talk about this thing. Let's do this thing. They're like, great. I heard you. We talked about your thing. And like, I don't like to go daddy voice, but I will. I'll be like, that's awesome. Is there anything else about you that's interesting? You know, and I'll be a little sarcastic and forward about it. Not always, but it depends on, like, if they ignored the advice about this is your time, if they ignore me changing the subject, then I tend to get more direct. Although I have the kind of personality that's more successful with that usually. That's not always the best course, but that's the direction I tend to go.
Hammond, I think you were shaking your head. Did you have another one?
I was just laughing about when he said, are there things more interesting about you? Sometimes there's not. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they're all about their work and they're all about them. And that's about what they got.
Sure. But other things happen when they're working.
Yeah.
What about that time you stole someone's sandwich behind the scenes? Tell me about that.
Mm-hmm.
Mike or Travis?
Okay. For me, it was more like, I had somebody did something similar, kept on, plugging, was a born, seller type thing and marketer. And it was almost like, okay, this is what you're going to, they kept on, every answer was, oh, and you could find me here and you could do this, all the time. And it's like, dude, we have a segment for that at the very end of your interview. Feel free to plug away then, but let's just talk. Let's just enjoy. He couldn't do it. He just could not do it. Yep.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little different in that most of my interviews are kind of about the guest and their like professional career and their work and everything. So the whole thing is kind of about that anyways. But I do always have like around like the first third or around halfway through, like just pitch me your work. Like, let's hear it. Like, let's talk about your latest thing and let's go from there. And then at the end, I always let them know, like, yeah, there's going to be like where to find you online. I kind of do like a post wrap credits on that myself because it's easy enough to find like their Instagram, their Twitter, their website without taking like a couple minutes of my 1 hour block.
Well, and somebody just asked you, do you preview, like look at interviews that other people, like your guest has done in the past? And I've done that. The guest that we had trouble with, we were the first show he was ever on. And I felt like I thought I prepped him, but I didn't prep him well enough. And I should have done things like at the beginning and the end, we're going to do this, and probably been more rude and interrupted him a few more times. But we survived. So we're about out of time. So I want you guys to let everybody know where they can find you and your podcast. And I think Hammond, you were last, so you go first.
I'm J Hammond C on Twitter. You can find me at Beyond the Playlist with J Hammond C and on Soundography.
Mike, I don't, just pick guys. You can do this for me.
Okay. All right. No problem. You can find me up on Twitter as Mike Faber 67. I'm part of the ESO Network. You could find me as esonetwork.com, or you could find me everywhere over Facebook under ESO Network.
Yeah, and you can find me on Twitter as TC Tippins, or you can find my podcast/blog as The Fantasy Inn. And our podcast is just The Fantasy Inn Podcast. So wherever you find your podcast, that'll pop up.
I'm on social media, Sean Weiland, at @male_NPC on all of the social medias. And our podcast, Wasted Knowledge Podcast, can be found on every service. That's its name. And The Beery Traveler can be found at thebeerytraveler.beer and on every other thing as The Beery Traveler.
There you go. And I'm Tyra Burton, and you can find me as Tyra Burton everywhere. And The Geeky Side and Geek Meet Social are my 2 podcasts, and you can find them. And somewhere out there, there are old episodes of Leveling Azeroth if you need to get your World of Warcraft on, which I think I might go play today. So.
Nice.
So thank you guys. And I think we actually ended a minute early. I'm so proud.
Oh, y'all did excellent. Thank you very
Golf
much.
claps.
Letting everybody know we're going to stop this broadcast right now because we want to keep these separated. And we'll be back at 3 o'clock with the next panel, which is, I believe it is the life and times of a blurred in America is what we're looking at. So come on back in just a few minutes or just stick around. We'll be back in just a minute.